Seager. Written by Kai Nakashima. Narrated by Avery Nakashima. Chapter 1. Journey starts. I was prodding through the snow after my master, Jessey. We had been walking for a day without stopping, and I couldn't understand why. From the look on his face, I guessed he was cold and hungry. He wanted to go home. So did I. I did not know why we had strayed so far from home. Surely his father would be worried that we hadn't returned by sundown. My master huddled by a rock and called, "Come here, boy." Of course, I ran to him. With the last of today's sun on his face, the cold air packaged us up. He fell asleep. So did I. When we woke, it was still dark. My master's eyes teared. I knew something was wrong, and I knew something was horrible when he started talking to himself. He began like this. How could this happen? I've never gotten lost before. Where is home? He turned to me, kneeled in the snow. He rubbed my face and said, "Where's home, boy?" Where? I tried to say to him, but of course, he did not understand. Why, it's this way, of course. I barked and led the way, or at least, I hoped it was the right way. A light crystal of snow fell onto my nose. It began to confetti down. My master and I waded through the ice. We walked and walked, and just walked some more. It's all we did now. It seemed like we did it so much I could say, walking is what I live for. But I didn't, because I didn't want to. Suddenly, Jessey dropped to the snow. I ran to him so fast, I skid on the ice. I jumped, barked, and licked his face, but he did not rise. This was no time for snow angels. Eventually, I lay next to him. Once again, we fell asleep. We woke to the third day on our own. We walked more. My master stopped. I saw it too, a deer on the horizon. I caught its scent, and my inner wolf kicked in. I bolted. I jumped on that deer. I was dragged. I was trod on, but I wouldn't let go. It was for my master. My master watched in horror. He picked up the snow and threw it. He didn't know how else to help. I closed my jaws on the deer's snout, which killed it. Jessey just stood there. What was he waiting for? I grabbed a mouthful of fur and dug in. "Good boy," he told me. We ate while it was warm. After foraging through the mess of bones, we sat. For a while, we sat, satisfied. But then we sat some more. Sat. We sat so long, I thought I could tell him, sitting is what I live for. But I didn't, because I couldn't, much less wanted to. Instead, I went over to him and nudged him with my big black nose. He looked sick to his stomach. I didn't know what to do, because I couldn't do anything. I curled around him, and he put an arm around me. Soon, he got up, still looking ill. He started walking. I wanted to stop him, but I knew finding home would make him feel better. It's what he decided, so it's what we would do. Chapter 2. Pepper and Her People. It was noon now, because the sun was right above our heads. I chased some rabbits for fun. Later, we stumbled upon some big black ravens picking at a carcass. Our meal from earlier. My master sat next to our old breakfast and cried. We'd been going in circles. Even I had to admit that we were lost. The way home was far in the back of my mind, and I just couldn't bring it up again. Nothing smelled like home anymore. My master rose, and we walked some more. Finally, we could see trees in the distance. Do you know what this meant? Lunch would be near. Jessey knew this and ran towards the trees. "Wait," I wanted to say. "Remember the deer? You got sick, remember?" He didn't listen to me, because he couldn't. But if he could, he would have said, "Oh yes, you are right. I guess we should just skip it and just try to find home." But this was all just a fragment of my imagination. My master ran to those trees, and of course I had to follow. We scared away the birds and squirrels, which quickly disappeared. So that was one meal gone. Jessey dropped to his knees. I thought he was upset again. But then he did this. He was digging. He dug like a dog. He was digging like me. He was digging up all kinds of nuts and food. It was the squirrel's stash of winter goods. How smart my master was. He cracked the nuts with all his strength and chewed the other foods thoughtfully. He threw some for me and I lapped it up, letting shells fall through my teeth. But then I tasted it. How horrible it tasted. Absolutely bitter. But I ate anyway. I got a stomachache, so I lie there. "You okay, Seager? You feeling bad?" Jessey asked. "You bet," I wanted to say, but of course, I couldn't, so I lie there. My master lie there with me, and again, we succumbed to the cold temptation to hibernate. I dreamt up this dream, you see, and it was mighty darn pleasant. We were in a house, and there was this fireplace and a warm blanket, but all of a sudden, I heard a man and woman talking. They were saying, "What about that dog?" as if it were a bad thing. I snuggled close to Jessey and fell back to sleep. I woke again, but this time, I was in a junky yard, fenced with stick wood. The snow was wet and mushy, and there were splinters of material littering the ground. It hurt my feet as I walked up to the house that smelled like wood, smoke, and dog, and it wasn't just me. Suddenly, I saw her. Her was a dog. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I thought she was beautiful. But no, I did not think that. She was missing fur and teeth. I continued to look through the window to see if my master was there, but I saw nothing, and then I felt pain. The old husky dog had bit my tail. I whirled around, jabbing a paw at her. She growled and bit harder, so I had no choice. I grabbed her tail and bit down. She yowled and let go of mine, running to the other side of the yard. I noticed her collar. It was red silk with a gold tag. How could she be so pampered when she was so mean? I was finally left alone, so I could re-inspect. I walked around the house to find a lower window, but it was fogged up and I couldn't see. But I could hear voices, my master's voice, and a man's. They spoke about where Jessey came from, but then I could not hear. I went to another window. "Where did you find me?" asked Jessey. "The woods out back," said the man. "Did you happen to find me with a dog?" "Nope. The only dog here is Pepper. She's the one who found you. Our good girl is so smart." I felt angry, but continued to listen. The woman soon joined them with the tinkling of silverware and porcelain. The back door squeaked as it opened. Pepper ran to it to get to her hot, steamy stew. I took the chance to get my master's attention. I barked, really loud. "It's him," Jessey yelled. Of course it was me. Chapter 3. Beautiful Woods. "That's my dog," Jessey said proudly. He flew to me and scooped me up in a big hug. "Why did you lie to me?" He suddenly looked at the man and woman, displeased. They tried to explain, but it wasn't good enough for my master. He told them he was sorry and that he could not stay. We went back to the woods, the beautiful wilderness. Were we becoming part of the wilderness? I asked myself. I didn't answer that. I didn't want to. So back to the woods we flew, like kings of the north. I wondered if we would see Pepper and her people again. After all, there may have just been a misunderstanding, but I guess I just couldn't know what would happen next. We walked and walked. We walked so long I could say, never mind. Anyway, we walked. Jesse stopped under a great big tree that was sleeping for the winter. He looked at the birds sitting in the branches. He sat too. I guess he was thinking. I watched him think. After a moment, he smiled. "Come here, boy," he called. I came. He scratched my ears. His eyes shone in the light. "I love you, Seager," is what he said. "Love you too," I wanted to say, but I couldn't, so I licked his face. He laughed. I rejoiced. It was as if everything was okay. But why did it seem like he was trying to say something else, like goodbye? He'd put his arms around me and leaned against the trunk, his eyes fluttering shut. I whined. He didn't open them. I barked. Nothing. What was it? Was he giving up? I had to help him. I looked around for something. Anything. Then I remembered. We found food by digging. I started digging. I dug crazy. I found a bit of grass, and then nutshells, so I kept digging deeper. A chipmunk ran past me, but I was so surprised I forgot to try and catch it. I dug further until I found some nuts. I glanced at Jesse. He was still in the same position. I grabbed the nuts in my teeth, when suddenly I heard, "Hey boy." It alarmed me, and I dropped them, but I was glad Jesse was better. He came to me with a scolding smile. "Hey Seager, you remember last time? You got sick, remember?" I would have said, "Oh yeah, I guess we should just skip it and try to find home." But I didn't, 'cause I couldn't. The sun went down. The horizon was red and purple. It was quite beautiful. My master and I paused to watch. We looked at each other, and then moved on. Our shadows grew long and dark against the sparkling snow. All of a sudden, I had a thought. I wished to tell my master that I loved him, just the way his humankind do, by saying so. But I couldn't, so I didn't. Jesse and I curled up beneath a windbreak that night, grateful for the stone that kept the cold off our faces. Night descended like a storm cloud, but Jesse peacefully slept with me under an arm. I remained awake until the air got its chilliest. Chapter 4: Rescued. I dreamt of home, how I longed to go home. It was a good dream, but horrible when I woke. But my master was still beside me, so that was all that mattered. The moon was still above us, its light glistening on all of the snow. It beamed in every icicle, on every tree. It was lovely. I lowered my head to sleep once more, but then I heard a growl. I turned. What I saw made my heart pound. A big cat, flying softly down the snow dunes straight at us. I ripped away from where I lie. Jesse awoke from behind me. "Hey boy," he yelled, seeing that I had torn off. But then he saw it too, the bold and hungry big cat. A terrible fight broke out. My master and I tried to protect each other, but we were both wounded by the time I finally scared the cat back into the woods. Panicked, my master walked on. I knew that he could not keep going as he was, so I jumped on him, pinning him to the snow. He lay there, rested. I protected him through the rest of the night. Morning came. I collapsed in the sun. I woke again at night. Why did I wake? I did not know, but it was just in the nick of time. I saw wolves, a whole pack of wolves. How would I fight a whole pack of wolves? I wouldn't, 'cause I couldn't, but I was going to try. I ran at them full speed, baring my teeth and barking viciously. They ran at me. In the midst of the race, I heard a human voice, but it wasn't Jesse's. It was a man. Suddenly, I realized these weren't wolves. They were dogs. The whole thing turned out to be a miracle. I ran to those dogs. I ran like the wind. I told them my story, and I told it good. Their master followed them as they followed me, and I showed them where Jessey was. By kind hands, he was lifted from the snow, and for that, I was grateful. For 3 nights we camped and traveled with the strangers. There was fire, meat to eat, and most importantly, company. The man's name was Friedrich. He tended Jessey every step of the way, but of course, I still worried. Those 3 nights felt like 3 years as I watched and wondered, and waited, and waited, and waited. I waited so long, I could have said, waiting is what I live for. But I didn't, because I didn't want to. We moved quite often, camping only every now and then. When Jessey finally woke up, I jumped on him and licked his face. He smiled and laughed, and said my name, Seager. Friedrich explained to Jessey what had happened. Jessey was not afraid because Friedrich was a kind person. Soon my master and the man were talking and having a good time. I got along quite well with the sled dogs too. I had to admit, this was as close to home as we could get. Chapter 5. The Village. The door of the house burst open, letting in the bitter wind and snowflakes. Friedrich walked in, carrying Jessey to the sofa. "Lucifer, get the kettle going," Friedrich called. "Uncle, you're back. What's wrong?" I heard a voice say. Both the uncle and nephew had just returned from hunting trips, but Friedrich had brought back a boy. He explained everything to Lucifer as they prepared food and fed us dogs. Jessey slept through their whole conversation. When Jessey awoke, the men ate and rested. Friedrich went to town to fetch supplies for his unexpected guests. Lucifer and Jessey were in the room. My master called me. "Good boy, Seager," he said. Lucifer then said, "I have a dog too." He called, "Come here, Cash." One of the huskies from before came running into the living room. Our masters began talking about us, and talked until Friedrich returned. The front door whooshed open. Friedrich stepped in with snow atop his scarves and coat. "Hello, boys," he greeted. We all greeted him back, and the men continued their chores for the day. Even Jessey was able to help hand men clothes and the blankets as he rested his wounds. After supper, Friedrich gifted Jessey with a new pocket knife. Lucifer looked jealous, but nobody else seemed to notice. We watched the flames in the fireplace before going to bed. The men stayed busy, but well rested for the next few days, and Jessey was healing fast, as was I. One day Friedrich asked, "Why don't we head out and ask around for your folk, Jessey?" He was speaking about going home. The boys put their coats and hats on. We all headed out the door, including the sled pack. As we walked, I looked back at the warm house. Where exactly could we be going? I glanced at the woods too. It looked harrowing, but I just kept walking. Soon, I heard voices up ahead. More voices than I had heard in weeks. Then I saw it. Snow-topped lodges glistened in the distance, and people wearing big furry coats. Talking, babbling, and loud noises came from all around. We became part of the jumble. The men asked around for people and directions. Everything was going great, until a crate full of smelly fish got knocked over. It was tempting to dig in, but I did not. But the huskies did. "Hey," someone yelled. Friedrich and Lucifer called the dogs. Neither Friedrich, Lucifer, or the owner of the crates looked very happy. "I'm so sorry," Friedrich said. "They don't usually behave like this." He then told Jessey to keep asking around while he and Lucifer rounded up the dogs. My master sighed. He had no idea where to start in this strange new town. As we went along, he asked every person that we saw. We had almost gone around the whole town square, when my master spotted Cash back behind one of the cabins. I barked, but he ran away. Jessey and I ran after him. He was headed towards the forest. "You do not want to go in there," I wanted to say. We waded through the snow, through the trees and icicles. We were going pretty far, and it was starting to concern me. I stopped. I barked at Jessey. He looked at me. He practically read my mind. "Don't worry, boy," he said. "I can still see the town from here. Just a little further to get Lucifer's dog back. It's the least we can do for he and Mr. Friedrich." He turned and kept going. I loyally followed, even though I didn't think it was such a good idea. On our way back, we saw a small bear cub. It fled immediately. I thought this might deter my master, but he kept going, and going, and going. Soon I could not smell Cash anymore, so it was useless to continue on. I had to stop Jessey there. I sat down and refused to move, but at least he got the point. We turned around and started back towards the village. I felt bad for Cash, but since he lived nearby, I'm sure he would find his way back home. He knew the woods far better than I. The sun was beginning to set. We arrived to a ghost town. No yelling, no chatting. My master called out, "Lucifer, Friedrich," but nothing. Chapter 6. Separated. We were about to head back to Friedrich's cabin, when suddenly I could see some people. They were hiding. Why were they hiding? My ear twitched. I heard a huge grunt. Before Jessey could turn, a man with a rifle gestured for Jessey to come to him, and hide also. What was going on? I sniffed the air. Before I could even realize what was happening, a lot of stuff happened. Something roared. Jessey and I turned to see the biggest bear we had ever seen in our entire lives, galloping towards us. The man told Jessey to get down. The rifle sounded across the town, but the bear did not stop. My master was in danger. I started running at that bear. I charged right into the bear's back leg as it reared. I sunk my teeth into its muscle. It swiped me away with just one slash, proceeding towards the man with the rifle. The man shot at it several times, but it did not slow down. With me nagging at its heels, and the man trying to hunt it down, it finally started back towards the forest. I went barking after it. I was so wrapped up in the chase, I didn't even know what was happening behind me. I left it behind. Out in the forest, Cash joined me in the chase as we herded that bear back to where it belonged. Barking and snapping at its feet, we had that bear running for its life. Everything was going fine, until that bear led us straight off a snow slope. The bear was big enough to make the jump over the rock cavern, but Cash and I slid all the way down into the darkness. We tumbled forever. At the bottom, I could only look up. Cash and I were in pretty bad shape. "Are you okay?" I would have said, but I couldn't, because I couldn't. For days we tried to escape the cave, and one day I woke up with Cash gone. He had finally figured a way out. I howled. Nobody came. My injury made it hard for me to jump and climb, but I thought about my master. I knew I had to get back to him. I kept trying, and trying. Trying was what I lived for. After many, many, many attempts, I finally climbed to the top of the cavern. I could see sky. I could see snow. I could see trees. I barked. Cash was long gone. The wind blew. I was alone. I began to walk. I traveled far. I tried to hunt, but I was too slow. I was hungry, but not hungry enough. I just wanted to get back to my master. I stumbled upon an ice flat, where I could see little fish swim by. There were icebergs in the distance, and I could smell salt. I had gone too far. I looked down at the ice beneath my feet. Water would have tasted good, but the ice was frozen shut. Something monstrous swam by. I ran off the ice and back into the forest. This was it. I was on my own. I slowly walked through the trees. I watched some birds fly past, completely out of my reach. I could see my breath. This was going to be a long journey ahead of me. Chapter 7. The Offer. Quietly, I lied down in a hole I dug and fell asleep. A terrible sleep. I howled in my sleep. I howled for my master. I woke to the ever lonesome night. The moon was full and bright. So bright, I should have kept walking, but I lie there, watching the snow glisten. I cried. I did just that. But then, I made a decision. I was going to find help. I would get out of this mess. And I didn't care what I had to do that. I didn't care at all. I began to walk in the night. Without distraction, I walked. Nothing could stop me, until I stopped dead in my tracks. I promised myself I wouldn't, but this was an exception. Sparkling in front of me was a brand new pocket knife. I got closer and sniffed it. Immediately, I knew it was Jessey's scent, and Lucifer's, and Friedrich's. But it didn't matter whose it was. Someone was looking for me. I started sniffing like crazy. I would have to find them quickly, before the ground was covered with more snow. I needed to find their footprints, which I did. I turned to follow this path, using my nose as my guide. Eventually, I came to a snow-topped ridge. I looked down into its canyon. I knew I shouldn't have, but I did. In the depths, you could see snow. It was all just rock and snow. I backed away, daunted by the height, and continued on. Joyfully, I made it back to the village. With the bear gone and the sun risen, everything was back to its usual self. People stopped to point and say things about me. Was it because I chased off the bear? Soon, I made it back to Friedrich's cabin, where I barked outside the door to get their attention. They let me inside to eat and cleaned me up afterwards. But then I heard them talking. Jessey was gone. His father had come for him and took him home. But why did Jessey leave without me? He couldn't have left without me. I was grateful for Friedrich and Lucifer. I ate what I could and rested in the warmth of their home. But soon, I would have to go. As soon as I got the chance, I left their doorstep, forever. I ran back to the forest where my master was looking for me. Out into the wilderness I went. I howled, hoping that Jessey would hear me. I wondered why I couldn't hear him calling. He couldn't have left me, could he? Terrible possibilities flooded through my head. But I had to keep going. Right as I was about to rush off into the woods, I smelled something. Danger. Another dog. Or was it? I glanced around and then saw them. Wolves. Real ones. Clear as day in the daylight. No one moved. The tallest, most regal-looking one looked me in the eyes. The alpha blinked, then turned away. Slowly, the rest of the pack went with him. They weren't going to hunt me, even though they were wolves, even though I was outnumbered. Curious, I wandered after. Every now and then, the leader looked back at me. I followed them all the way to a snowy thicket where they had left their recent kill. They backed off for me to eat. Was this a trick? I decided to see what they would do, so I approached the elk. Nothing. They were inviting me to be a part of their tribe. I tried to tell the wolves about my master, but they did not understand. It seemed this was all they had to offer me. The Omega lingered as the pack began to move on. He seemed to wonder why I was so sad. I did not know what to do. There was nothing I could do. But maybe, just possibly, accept this offer. Chapter 8. Darkness. The wolf stayed with me. He was glad to have a friend. I would have told him my name, but he probably wouldn't understand, so I didn't. He ran past a melting stream that was just beginning to trickle. We both stopped to drink. We went on. Soon, we came across the snow-topped ridge again. The wolf looked down into the canyon like I had, but he didn't look scared at all. On that very edge, I thought I caught Jessey's scent, but it was just my imagination. I scrambled down his imaginary trail. The gray wolf followed. I pretended to be dead in Jessey's tracks. I knew I would find him. I would stop for nothing. We stumbled up to a cave opening on the side of the cavern walls. Suddenly, the wolf became nervous. He looked at me. I smelled it too. Something bad. Something foul. We went to investigate the cave entrance. I smelled bear. I walked into the cave just a bit more to see if I was right. We came face to face with that giant bear, but we didn't have to worry. It was dead. The wolf came running in, starting to tear at its fur. Was he crazy? Were we really going to eat this? I suppose it couldn't hurt, but I really had no time. I needed to find my master. I had to. I ran right past that bear, deeper into the cave. The wolf followed me for some time, but soon disappeared. It was dark in that cave. It was cold, but I really thought I could smell my master. I crawled over rocks, squeezed between them, dug through them, anything I could do to fit. Further into that cave I went. It was darker than night, but I had to be brave. I went tunneling through that darkness, navigating with my senses. Unexpectedly, I got stuck. I panicked. I failed and clawed to get out, but it made things worse. I fought until I was exhausted, so I stopped, resting in the blackness. I could not smell Jessey anymore. It was my imagination all along. It was hopeless. That's what it felt like. I wanted to howl, but I couldn't, so I didn't. A long time passed. I don't know how long. Maybe days. But maybe that was my imagination. I just didn't know. I couldn't tell. There was no light. No light. I moved. I moved a little more. I could just move. I was unstuck. I could move in that darkness. I wandered the darkness. Something told me I was alone here. No wolf would come to greet me. I felt my way around the cave, in the pitch black, or maybe I was blind. I imagined a breeze, or maybe it was a breeze, coming from a little crack in the cave wall. I scratched at it weakly. There was no give, but I wouldn't give up, for I could see light. With what strength I had, I dug. I dug and dug and dug. I could have said, digging is what I live for, but I didn't, because it wasn't true. Soon, I could smell fresh, cold snow, sweet with spring. I was free. Chapter 9. This Forgiveness. I walked in the snowy blankness. There was nothing but snow. I could smell it, and touch it, and taste it, but all of it was snow. It crunched under my feet. Its white color was blinding. I realized it was my despair that had led me here. My master had abandoned me. It was an awful thing to wake up to. I walked and walked. I smelled trees in the distance. I walked some more. I smelled deer, but it was only deer tracks. I walked a little more. Now it was deer bones. Our deer bones. The first meal of our wild adventure, sitting in the melting snow. I was so close to home, but I didn't know which way to go. I kept moving, and then I heard it. Footsteps in the ice. I saw her, the strangest dog I'd ever seen in my life. A ghostly white, white as the snow. Even her eyes, white. She blinked. It was unreal. But I saw it. She turned. It was so odd. She sprinted off into the layers of white, begging me to chase her. Despite my pain, I began walking faster, and faster, and faster. I'd begun to run like the northern winds. My heart was racing. I felt like flying again. The dog outran me still, but I could feel my strength return. She froze. I skid on the snow, heaving for a breath. She glanced at me one last time, then trotted off into the wilderness, where she blended into the snow, completely camouflaged until she vanished. But it did not matter. I had realized something. The wild was where she belonged. The freedom of the wilderness is what she loved, so it did not matter if she disappeared. That is what I had realized. But me, I could not. Home is where I belonged, and what I loved was home, where Jessey was. I saw it, the little village in the distance, my home. I ran like I never had before. All of these thoughts raced through my head. All of these feelings went shooting through my body. All of these splendors flew through my spirit. I was dirty and thin from the adventure I had. Would Jessey even recognize me? I did not know. I was supposed to distrust him after all. Distrust him for leaving me behind. But I wouldn't, 'cause I couldn't, 'cause I didn't have to.